Would you rather juggle chainsaws or bowling pins?
I do not want to juggle chainsaws.
I don't either. It would not be fun.
You know, something else I don't want to juggle. Podcast recordings.
Yeah.
So listener alert. This is
Alert.
This is a redo. For some reason, when we did this episode on chainsaws and bowling pins, the audio was faulty. And it is not up to our standards. We took a chainsaw to it.
Yeah.
And yeah. So it's going to be gone. So if you already heard this is going to be a little different version, because if you've been listening to us for a while, you know that we do not go off of script. We just go off of some ideas, and what do you have a word for this? Vamp? Is
vamp?
That?
Yeah.
We just vamp.
Vamping's fun. I like it.
I'm glad you didn't say vape.
No,
I'm glad you didn't say
that's
vape,
not fun.
No, because we don't do that. But so we vamp, and so this is good. If you've already listened to 62 and you could barely hear me and you could hear Nate real well, maybe you like that better. Maybe the audience likes that better.
No.
But that wasn't the greatest audio, so we're redoing it. This is going to be very similar in concept and the key points, the fundamentals, but the vamping is going to be different because
that'll be kind of fun to see how this goes.
Yeah. So if you've already listened to it, maybe you'll listen to this again and get something more out of the mental model that we're going to hit. And if this is the first one, then it doesn't even matter.
You won't know any different.
You won't know any different. So juggling, by the way, I am not a juggler.
I juggle small objects for fun, and I'm not great at it.
Yeah, and I think that is a complete waste of time. Although you might argue that there's some hand-eye coordination and some type of neurotransmitter brain thing going on.
It's the same argument kids use for being good at video games. It develops my hand-eye coordination.
Yes.
It's not that important.
Hey, I had a kid once tell me that he was playing a lot of video games for the hand-eye coordination because one day he was going to be a surgeon.
You know, I actually did see a study, and I think that they are starting to see some correlates between the amount of video games that kids played and skill with surgery.
Interesting. However,
it is interesting.
He needed to dial up the work ethic for sure.
Yeah. If you're going to be a surgeon, you better have some work ethic. You need to study just a little bit.
So why are we talking about juggling, Nate?
In
terms of how this relates to parents and them relating to their teens and the whole craziness of that life.
Yeah. And it is crazy. And that's more where we're going. Like, this is less about the chainsaws and the bowling pins. And it's way more about this concept of juggling, because that's one of the biggest challenges that parents face is how do you manage all of the stuff you have going on? How do you deal with, especially if you have multiple kids, or if you have a kid playing multiple sports, or you have multiple kids playing multiple sports and multiple performing activities, then it gets really crazy. Then you throw in your job, your spouse's job. Yeah. I think I'm preaching to the choir with a lot of people that listen to this, because you're usually pretty busy.
So we aren't actually really going to talk about chainsaws and bowling pins.
No, you mentioned a little earlier what we were going to really get into.
Yeah. So a little bit of false advertising. Maybe we had some people out there that were hoping to watch the video version of this and watch somebody
me attempt to juggle chainsaws.
Yeah.
No.
I don't like chainsaws. I like to watch other people operate them. And the guy that operated the crazy guy that always operates it in a haunted house, I always want to punch that guy. I do.
At least you go in them. I don't go in haunted houses. Stay far away from them. Don't like them. They mess with my head. I know they're fake, and like they don't bother me that much. Where they get me is when I wake up at 2:30 in the morning. That's when they get me. Like, my own head is what destroys me.
Okay, well, you don't like them. Let's don't talk about them.
Yeah, amen.
So we're talking about juggling, Nate, and I think we're really looking at this whole idea of prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
Parents, they're wearing the badge of busyness. They have all these different things going on, practices, games, performances, school. They have their lives, their things. And it really becomes difficult sometimes to prioritize. And when that happens, you're going to have breakdowns in communication. You're going to have a major strain on relationships. And
Yeah.
we're all about trying to improve the relationships, trying to improve the communication. So I am so happy that you have a mental model that really, it's a comparison model between two things
Yeah.
that really can help parents prioritize. Well, it can help anybody, right? But we're here for parents, and we're parents. We're well, you're still a parent. Well, we'll always be parents. I was going to
We'll
say
always be parents.
I'm a recovering parent of teens, and now a
I have
developing.
one still in the teens, but not much
Yeah,
longer.
yeah. So let's hear the mental model.
So, like you said, it's a comparison, and I'll just throw the first part that we're going to talk about. Do you want to hear the whole comparison first, and then break down one at a time, or
Just vamp.
just vamp? All right. Well, let's start with the first part of this is the ladder. And when it comes to priorities, it's really easy to go to the ladder because it kind of makes sense. You know, we're trained our whole lives to write to-do lists, and then we scale it out, write it 1 to 5, number them top to bottom. We're always looking for first, second, third. So it makes sense in our minds to have a top priority. We call it the top priority, so it makes sense to put it on the top of the ladder. So that's half the mental model, but that's the part that we struggle with. Is that's the kind of our default mental model when it comes to prioritizing. We tend to think in terms of what's my top priority, what's first, what's second, what's third. And that can be, that poses a lot of different challenges. The other half of this, and we'll dig more into this later, but what we're comparing it to is a wheel. And we'll save the breakdown of the wheel later, but let's continue to break down that idea of the ladder and the challenges that it sets up. So when we have a ladder of priorities, you have to make a decision. What's my top priority? What's going to go on the top of the list? Then you have to put something in second, then third, because each rung of the ladder just is a home for one of those priorities. And some of the fallout from that is we create this strange hierarchy that doesn't help us to really have the good feelings that we want to have. Like it gives us a picture of, okay, this is my most important thing, but it sets us up for guilt more than anything else.
I can see how this works because I'm thinking of the vertical setup of a ladder. So
Right.
You're talking about, we just naturally rank things. We put them in an order, which is going to put one over the other. And are you saying that it may not necessarily be more important than something else? But it
forces you to make a declaration that this is more important than this.
Right.
And when it comes to relationships, that's when it gets really messy, because if let's say, my wife is really important to me. My kids, I have 3 kids. They're all really important to me. My job's really important to me. Well, when if my job's at the top of the list, then I'm sending a pretty clear message to my wife and my kids that, like, okay, you're second, and then you're third, fourth, and fifth. And we can try to juggle that and move that around. But anybody that's climbed a tall ladder knows if you start trying to move too fast, you get in a precarious position when you're there, when you start trying to step up to this one, down to that one, move rungs around. It gets really dangerous.
Nate, I have a rule.
I think I'm going to like this rule.
Stay off of ladders. And
yes,
it's mainly because I have a neighbor, and he has fallen off his ladder twice in the last 2.5 years. Yeah. And we actually saw him the other day, and the ladder was out.
Oh, no.
And my grandson was over, and he saw it, and he even pointed to it and said, "Hey, stay off of the ladder."
Well, your grandson's wise, because it sets us up, like the ladder, when we start using it to try to prioritize prioritize things. It really can set us up for guilt, and it sets us up for like an expectation. Can be negative expectations. You come, well, you're always putting work first, and well, I have to put work first. We're really busy right now, and that's how we pay the bills. And it's just it's hard to gain clarity, and it sets you up for a lot of guilt.
Yeah, because when you prioritize one thing, you're
You
basically
have to deprioritize something else.
You are deprioritizing something else.
Yeah. And it feels like it. So like if your mental model is that ladder, it's like, okay, well, I've got to make this my top priority right now. And so I'm going to choose to, deprioritize these other things. And if you're deprioritizing important relationships, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And you're going to feel that. People are going to feel that.
It's one thing if it's a thing, but if it's a person, now that person feels less important.
Yep. And even with like how many times have you talk to people that don't sleep as much because they're like, oh, I'm so busy, I can't sleep. So they deprioritize sleep. They move sleep down the ladder, and you can't hurt sleep's feelings, but man, what does that do to our energy levels? What does that do to our ability to show up with excellence every day? It's like, it's not good.
Right. So now I don't want our listeners to assume that we are saying prioritization is bad.
Oh, prioritization's great.
But it's the approach to how we prioritize things. And the latter approach, not good.
Right. And we go to it because it's easy. It's what we're familiar with. And so we just kind of default to that, which is why I like the mental model and having this other part to compare it to, which is the wheel. And a wheel's a great comparison for this because when we prioritize things, your boy Stephen Covey, the OG,
the GOAT,
yeah,
the greatest of all time,
all of the initials.
Yes, everything's a remix, and most of the remixes out there in personal development, a lot of it you can trace back to Stephen Covey.
Yeah, he's so good. But his thing about priorities is one of the greatest phrases of all time when it comes to prioritization. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And when you're doing the latter, you have to like make a choice. It's like, okay, what's going to be the main thing? And you're probably going to end up switching it out, which is a big part of where the problem comes from when you're switching what the main thing is, because you're not keeping the main thing the main thing. But when you get on a wheel, you can put there at the center of the wheel, you have the axle, and the axle holds it all together. I don't know if there's an official name for that little thing that connects to the axle, but it's that center part of the wheel. And that's clearly your main thing. And you don't have to change that out. And you shouldn't change that out because it messes up the wheel. But this is why it helps with clarity, because you can get crystal clear about what your main thing is.
I've noticed in our conversations, you love to say, get crystal clear.
Yeah.
I love to say, clarity is king.
Clarity is the king. I say that enough, just not enough with you. I like to bring that up with clients and other things, because clarity is the king. Like when you've got a clear picture of what the main thing is, you get a lot more efficient, a lot more productive, and yeah, it's good.
Yeah, so you have the main thing in the middle of the wheel.
Yes.
How does this make prioritization actually pretty easy in theory?
Well, it allows you place all the other things around it. So you have the different roles in your life. Like back to the example I was using earlier. If I have my wife, I have my 3 kids, and I want to, treat each of my kids as individuals, so they can all be in there. And my role, I have a role as a father. I have a role as a son, and you start bringing in other things, job, volunteer work, possibly being, involved in like a church or a faith community. You've got a lot of other important things that you can put in there. Your personal health, your personal well-being, your sleep, but those all fit now on the outside of the wheel. And the main thing is what holds it all together. And so it allows you to keep something in the middle that's almost more of a concept than it is a thing. And you can put a thing there in the middle. Like I could put, my relationship with my wife there in the middle, and it would work great. And if I have that relationship, now I'm always able to go through that process knowing this is the most important thing. Yes, I have to spend a lot of time with work right now. So my time with my wife is less, but how can I still continue to treat her like she's the most important thing? So it sets us up to have better conversations in our head about how we structure our days and how we use the time that we have.
Right. I think this would be so helpful for a parent and a teen to create together, create the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would help eliminate a lot of confusion between parents and teens as far as communicating what is most important. I also see another application, Nate, and that is you could have multiple wheels in your life. Like you could
Mm-hmm.
have one that's just overall for everything, encompasses just your entire life, and you have your centerpiece, whatever you choose it to be. But for example, a teen could have that for their whole life, but they could also create a wheel for being on the basketball team, school. And you would find on their big wheel, you would find that probably being on the basketball team is one of the things on the outside. School is one of the things on the outside, but you could really dive down deeper. And so my role as a varsity player, what is the most important thing? Like what have my coaches communicated to me about my role? Why
Mm-hmm.
am I playing basketball? What drew me to this? And I think this could be really beneficial. And
Yeah.
you might be able to find, you would probably find that you might be spending time on some things that are keeping you away from focusing on the main thing.
Yeah.
Because remember, the main thing is to keep the main thing
The
the
main
main
thing.
thing.
Yes.
Yes. Am
I,
I
I
right?
think I think so. I think you're onto something with that. And like you could have, some more temporary wheels for any part of your life. And
Oh, I like that, because especially for a teen, things are going to change. Well, for all of us, they
yes.
change. We're
Yeah.
constantly evolving. And so you might have a temporary wheel.
Yep. But you just remove and even in removing one wheel and putting another back on, you can still keep the main thing, the main
The main
thing.
thing.
And so it allows you like the flexibility that creates. I always like to think of this, and this is part of why I fell in love with this mental model, is it allows me to fix things more efficiently and not feel like things are as broken when it comes to my priorities. Because in life, sometimes, work gets crazy busy and we spend more time there, or, somebody gets sick and we have to spend more time with this relationship than others. But that's just like when a tire gets out of round or you get a flat tire. And it's just it's easier to fix that because you're like, okay, well, I know what I need to do to adjust and adapt here. Whereas
Yeah.
if you're on the ladder and something breaks, you could fall off. Your whole world could feel like it's falling down. And it's a lot harder to get back up from that sometimes.
Right. No more Christmas lights.
Well, I pay somebody to do that.
You pay people to do it, or we may just be going to a lawn display.
Yeah.
I like that. Keep your feet on terra firma. So I heard you saying earlier, so if you're making adjustments on your wheel,
Mm-hmm.
maybe as you notice something on the outside needs to go, or maybe you need to add something, there is that pretty constant thing, which is you've already decided, hey, this is the main thing. So you can decide what you're going to bring in on the outside. Like, does
Yeah.
this support the main thing? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Like we both, and even in this conversation, we've talked about how important clarity is. Clarity is king. Getting crystal clear about stuff. If you are that clear about what the main thing is, it allows you so much power in how you structure your time and how you structure your relationships. And it makes sure that you can intentionally make each of those count. You show up for your job with intention. You show up for your important relationships with intention. And that's a very valuable thing. I do want to go back to can we go back to the teen thing for a second? This is so critical for if parents can teach their kids this. This is the approach that helps kids learn how to juggle school, their activity, their sport, and possibly a job, a social life. And it allows kids to feel like they don't have to well, I can't hang out with my friends because I have to do this. No, just what's the main thing? What do you want to get out of this? And it can lead to some very important coaching conversations that you can have with your kids about what's really important to them. And then you help them. It might help your kids find more value in homework. Because if they're coming home and they're saying, well, when am I ever going to use this math? They're not wrong. And it's really hard to argue with them on that. But if you have worked with them and helped them realize, okay, yeah, you're not ever going to use the math in your life, but is that why you're doing it? You say you want to get a scholarship. You say you want to go to the school, so you have to get good grades. The math homework's part of the package. You might not use it, but you will use the skill that you need to manage your time to do that. So I think it sets up some great conversations.
Yeah. So let's finish with this, Nate. If a parent was to just grab a piece of paper, paint the picture of how they would sit down at a table and open up a conversation about the wheel, like how would they do this? Is it just as simple as let's draw a big circle on the page?
Mm-hmm. I honestly, when I do this with kids, what I like to do is I have them list their important roles, the things that they're involved in that are important to them. Well, I like my church group, and yeah, school's important. And even if they hate it, they're still going to admit that school's got some importance. My sports, my family, my friends. And so you come up with this list and you usually get 5-7 items on there. It's like, wow, well, which of those is the most important to you? And you ask them that, and you can kind of play around it. It can be a playful conversation. They're like, well, my sports is the most important to me. Well, that's great that your sports are really important, but is anything else important to you? Well, my friends are really important to me too.
So you're trying to get them to the main thing,
right? You're trying to get them talking about roles, because what you now can do is put all of those on the wheel, and then you can figure out what is the main thing there. What is it that's driving you to do all of those things? And generally, like I'm a big believer that whatever's in the middle of that wheel it's way better if it's a value that's important to them that describes who they want to be rather than what they're doing.
Right.
What kind of friend do you want to be? What kind of athlete do you want to be? What kind of performer do you want to be? What kind of son or daughter? And get them thinking who they want to become and use that in the center of the wheel. I think that's a way more secure approach to it rather than having one of their roles fill that.
So what are the questions to ask? If let's say they're just listing tasks, listing roles such as, varsity player, straight A student, those types of things. What's the question to ask that's going to get them to think about who they want to become? Is it as simple as who do you want to become in life? Who do you want to be?
As they're going through those roles, I think it's asking, they bring up friends. What kind of qualities do you admire in your friends? When you want to be a great hockey player, what makes a great hockey player? What are some of the skills that they have? What are some of the character skills they have? And so it's just, and this is a process. Like, it's not going to be fast, but if you have that conversation where you get them describing some of the qualities that a good friend, a good student, a good performer, a good athlete would have now, and you can make a list of those on the side as well and start looking for common threads.
I love it. Parents, go do this. And we would love to hear from you. You can email us at createtransformbecome, all one word, @gmail.com. Tell us your experience with the wheel. And Nate, I've got a charge for you.
Okay.
And that is not only don't walk under ladders, but also do not get on ladders.
I try very hard to avoid them. On behalf of Steve Galley, I'm Nate Crandall, and we thank you, our loyal listeners, for tuning in to this episode. If you love what you're learning from the Stop Parenting and Start Coaching podcast, we would appreciate it very much if you would leave us a 5-star review and some glowing comments. We also encourage you to share this episode with your friends and family who are parents of athletes and performers. And if you want to explore further and see what Steve and I are creating to help thousands of parents, athletes, and performers, please visit our company's website at createtransformbecome.com. That's createtransformbecome, all one word, .com. There you will find a growing number of resources to help you elevate your performance. Thank you again for your support, and we encourage you to create a magical relationship with your athlete and performer.